The Jedi were supposed to be the guardians of peace. Calm, wise, serene. The ones who step in when everyone else is too blinded by anger or fear. That is the mythology we are sold. But then the Clone Wars arrive, and suddenly the monks are wearing armor leading battalions and turning into generals overnight. What happened to peacekeepers? Think about it. A mysterious army shows up out of nowhere. No clear answers about who paid for it or why. And instead of rejecting it, the Jedi grab command without hesitation. These same Jedi who preach detachment from emotion never once detach themselves from power. They ride straight into a galaxy-wide war sitting on top of legions bred only to die. That is not noble. That is reckless. And the hypocrisy is staggering. The Jedi talk about compassion while ordering men into slaughter. They claim to value life while commanding soldiers who never had a choice. They brag about wisdom while ignoring every alarm bell that screamed trap. It is almost impressive how blind they managed to be. Almost. Meanwhile, the clones gave everything. They were brave, loyal, and painfully human in every way that mattered. They formed bonds, friendships, even families in the shadows of war. And yet to the Jedi they were just another weapon in the arsenal. The same order that taught Anakin to avoid attachments could not see the humanity in the men fighting beside him. This is why their downfall feels less like a twist and more like justice. Palpatine may have pulled the strings, but the Jedi tied the knots themselves. By embracing the clone army, they signed their own death warrant. And when Order 66 came, it was not just betrayal. It was the inevitable consequence of their own hypocrisy. In this video, we're going to break down why the Jedi never deserved the clone army, how their choices doomed themselves and the Republic, and why the clones are the true legacy of the Clone Wars. The Jedi Order always claimed to be guardians of peace, not soldiers. Their entire identity was supposed to revolve around diplomacy, restraint, and wisdom. Yet the moment the clone army was unveiled, they stepped right into the role of generals without hesitation. No investigation into who commissioned it. No questions about why a mysterious army was waiting conveniently for them. They simply accepted command and marched into war. That was the first red flag that something was deeply broken. Think about the hypocrisy for a second. These were monks sworn to defend life and avoid attachments. Yet they commanded legions of men who had been bred in vats and programmed for loyalty. They gave orders that sent clones to their death daily, while insisting they themselves were detached from emotion. How can you preach compassion and serenity when your every order results in thousands of casualties? It was a contradiction at the heart of their philosophy. This decision revealed how arrogant the Jedi had become. They were so confident in their moral authority that they could rationalize anything. The Council told themselves they were leading the clones to protect the Republic and preserve peace. But in reality, they were fueling a war machine that was designed to consume lives endlessly. They could not see that they were pawns on Palpatine's board. Or maybe they did see it, but chose to ignore it. Even the way the Jedi treated the clones shows this blindness. To the clones, the Jedi were heroes and commanders. To the Jedi, the clones were assets. Anakin called them brothers. Plo Koon respected them deeply. But the Council as a whole still viewed them as tools. Mace Windu never once asked if the clones wanted to fight. Yoda rarely spoke to them as individuals. Obi-Wan sympathized but never challenged the ethics of their existence. It was a silent acceptance of slavery in a new form. Consider how bizarre it is that the Jedi never questioned the logistics. A single bounty hunter's DNA magically results in millions of identical soldiers conveniently delivered to the Republic at the exact moment of crisis. Any detective could see the setup. But the Jedi ignored every alarm bell because the army gave them what they needed. An answer to the separatists, and a reason to play soldiers. They chose the easy path instead of the right one, and that is the root of the problem. The Jedi had grown too comfortable with power. They had seats in the Senate and were already being treated as a military force during peacekeeping missions. The arrival of the clone army simply formalized what they were already becoming. They could tell themselves they were still monks, but the reality was clear. They were generals now, and they were complicit in everything that followed. The tragedy is that the clones themselves were not machines. They were men. Rex Cody Fives echo Jesse. These were people with emotions, memories, and individuality. They laughed, they argued, they questioned orders. Yet the Jedi rarely acknowledged that humanity. They led the clones like pieces on a game board, rather than equals in the fight. That lack of recognition doomed their relationship from the start. When you strip away the Jedi's excuses, the truth is obvious. They did not deserve the loyalty of the clones. They had not earned it. The clones gave everything to serve a republic that saw them as expendable. And the Jedi did nothing to change that system. They accepted it and benefited from it. That is not guardianship. That is complicity. Once the war began, the Jedi dug themselves even deeper into their new role. They became the face of the Republic's military machine. Jedi robes gave way to armor. Jedi teachings gave way to tactics. Their image across the galaxy shifted from monk to general, almost overnight. And the people noticed. What kind of guardians of peace led battalions into sieges and campaigns that devastated entire worlds? The Jedi had traded philosophy for strategy maps and never looked back. The clones, meanwhile, gave everything. They fought on Geonosis in brutal battles of attrition. They stormed Christophsis under impossible odds. They died by the thousands on Umbara, where Jedi arrogance led them into disaster after disaster. And through it all, they remained loyal. Not because they wanted to, but because they were designed to. And that fact alone should have given the Jedi pause. But it never did. This relationship also eroded the Jedi's credibility. Citizens across the galaxy began to view them as warlords rather than diplomats. The separatist narrative that the Jedi were warmongers suddenly looked more convincing. Palpatine barely had to manipulate the truth. The Jedi were doing it to themselves. Every time they marched into battle, they undermined their own claim to moral authority. The Jedi Council also revealed how detached they were from the reality of the war. They sat in their temple debating strategy and trusting that their involvement was righteous. Meanwhile, clones bled and died on the front lines. How many times did Yoda or Mace speak about the will of the Force while ignoring the will of the men they commanded? The Jedi were blind because they chose to be. It was easier to maintain their image than confront the truth. Even when individuals like Anakin or Ahsoka pushed back, the institution remained rigid. Anakin questioned orders constantly. Ahsoka grew disillusioned to the point of leaving the order entirely. These were cracks in the foundation. They showed that not everyone believed the Jedi deserved the army, but the Council never listened. They dismissed dissent as emotional weakness or immaturity. That arrogance blinded them until it was too late. The ethical contradiction also poisoned their teachings. Imagine being a youngling told to value life, but then being handed a lightsaber and placed in command of men bred to die. The message was clear. Compassion was conditional, peace was negotiable, and life was expendable. That warped philosophy is what doomed the Jedi as much as Palpatine's schemes ever did. And it is worth pointing out that some Jedi absolutely recognized this. Depa Billaba suffered a breakdown from the horrors of war. Pong Krell outright turned on his clones, seeing them as cannon fodder beneath him. Even characters like Obi-Wan, who sympathized, never went far enough to challenge the structure itself. The truth is that the Jedi had accepted the system, even if individuals struggled with guilt. Palpatine, of course, exploited every bit of this hypocrisy. He knew the Jedi would embrace the role of general because their pride would not allow them to refuse. He knew they would rationalize the clone army as destiny rather than manipulation. And he knew the war would erode their credibility until the people saw them not as protectors, but as oppressors. The Jedi handed him every tool he needed to destroy them. By the time Order 66 came around, the Jedi were not only unprepared, they were already morally defeated. They had relied on the loyalty of men they never truly respected. And those men were turned against them with a single command. The betrayal was not just in the chips, it was in the entire relationship from the start. The Jedi's hypocrisy made the clones their executioners. And in many ways they earned it. When you look back at the Clone Wars with clear eyes, the conclusion is inescapable. The Jedi did not deserve the army that fought and died for them. The clones deserved better. They deserved leaders who saw them as equals rather than pawns. They deserved to live lives beyond endless campaigns. Instead, they were condemned to die in a war that was never theirs to begin with. Consider what might have happened if the Jedi had refused the army. They could have denounced it as unnatural and unethical. They could have warned the Senate that no republic founded on slavery could call itself just. It would have been the hardest decision imaginable. But it also might have forced the galaxy to face the truth sooner. Instead, they embraced convenience and played right into the Emperor's hand. Even the way the war ended highlights the tragedy. Rex removing his chip shows that the clones had the capacity to choose, to break free of programming, to be more than soldiers. But the Jedi never nurtured that potential. They never asked what the clones wanted because they never saw them as independent beings. That is the ultimate betrayal. Look at how clones like Fives tried to expose the truth. He risked everything to tell the Jedi about the chips, and what did the Council do? They dismissed him. They doubted him. They ignored him until he was killed. The clones gave warning after warning, but the Jedi refused to listen. It was easier to maintain the illusion that everything was under control. In hindsight, it is clear that the Jedi had already lost the moral war long before the first blaster bolt of Order 66 was fired. They preached about balance but had abandoned it. They preached about compassion but ignored it. They preached about wisdom but acted blindly. The clone army was the mirror that exposed their hypocrisy, and they looked away. The clones meanwhile left behind a legacy the Jedi never earned. Men like Rex Wolf Gregor and others went on to prove they were more than just soldiers. They became individuals free of the war and its lies. Their humanity outlived the Jedi's arrogance. And that is why fans resonate so strongly with them, because they embody what the Jedi failed to see. This is why the fall of the Jedi feels less like tragedy and more like justice. They had the chance to question. They had the chance to resist, but they did not. And so they lost not only their order, but the right to call themselves protectors. The clones gave them everything and got nothing in return. From a storytelling perspective, this makes the saga even richer. The Jedi's downfall was not just Palpatine's victory, it was their own failure, their own hypocrisy, destroying them from the inside. And the clone army was the perfect symbol of that hypocrisy. So when we say the Jedi did not deserve the clone army, we are not exaggerating. They failed the clones, they failed the Republic, and ultimately, they failed themselves.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.